the forgotten prospect. Every great player has a moment where the world finally takes notice, but some players have to fight just to get that moment. Coming out of Chesapeake, Virginia, Kaiden Cross was never the name at the top of recruiting boards. While five-star athletes had cameras following their every move, Kaiden was fighting for recognition. The 6'1", 198-pound free safety was labelled a two-star prospector, overlooked because scouts questioned his athletic ability and ceiling, but they couldn't measure what made him different. The instincts, the preparation, the ability to see a play before it happened. Quarterbacks across Virginia learned quickly. Throwing anywhere near number 7 was a risk. Kaiden had a gift for reading offenses, creating turnovers, and changing the game when his team needed him most. But one school mattered more than the rest: Virginia Tech. The school he grew up dreaming about, the stadium, the fans, the tradition. Kaiden imagined himself running onto the field to enter Sandman wearing the Hokies uniform, but the offer never came. The forgotten two-star recruit transformed into a four-star talent, forcing the same programs that ignored him to fight for his commitment. His final choices: Virginia Tech, North Carolina, Penn State, Tennessee, South Carolina. Everyone expected him to choose the hometown dream. Instead, Kaiden chose the school that believed in him before the hype: South Carolina. On signing day, Kaiden delivered a message that explained his decision. "I wanted a place that believed in me before the stars changed. South Carolina saw who I was becoming, and that's where I want to build my legacy." Now the next chapter begins. A freshman safety entering the SEC, a player with something to prove, a prospect who remembers every team that passed on him. His goals are simple: win the starting job, become one of the best safeties in college football, earn All-American honors, win a championship, and hear his name called on the first night of the NFL draft. The recruiting services saw a two-star, South Carolina saw a future star. Now the entire country is about to learn the name Kaiden Cross. For Kaiden Cross, earning a scholarship wasn't the finish line. It was only the beginning. After shocking the recruiting world by choosing South Carolina, Kaiden Cross arrived on campus believing he would compete for the second-string free safety job. It wasn't the starting role he dreamed of, but it was a chance to prove he belonged. Then the first depth chart was released. Kaiden searched for his name. First string, nothing. Second string, nothing. Then he found it. Third string. The promise he thought he had disappeared in an instant. He felt blindsided. The opportunity he believed he had earned was gone before he ever took a college snap. Once again, he was being underestimated. For a moment, frustration crept in. He questioned why he had been told one thing only to arrive and find another. It felt like all the work he had put in to become a four-star recruit had been forgotten the moment he stepped onto campus. But then Kaiden remembered something. His entire career had been built on proving people wrong. He wasn't handed a four-star rating. He earned it. He wasn't handed a scholarship. He earned it. Why should this be any different? So, while everyone else looked at the depth chart, Kaiden looked at the practice field. Every drill became an opportunity. Every film session became another chance to learn. Every rep was another step toward the top. He wasn't competing against just one player anymore. He had two veterans standing between him and the starting job. The climb would be longer. The work would be harder. But if history had taught Kaiden Cross anything, it was this. The best chapters of his story have always started when someone told him he wasn't good enough. Now, the forgotten prospect begins the biggest battle of his career, from third string to first, and he plans to earn every step of the climb. The wait. Sometimes the hardest part of the journey isn't the work, it's waiting for your opportunity. Week after week, the season rolled on. Game after game, Kaiden Cross stood on the sideline, watching the defense take the field. The first string free safety played nearly every snap. The second string safety was the first one off the bench. Kaiden was still third. He continued to dominate practice, earning praise from coaches for his effort, preparation, and football IQ. But when Saturdays arrived, his helmet stayed on, while someone else lived the dream he had worked so hard to reach. It was frustrating. There were moments when Kaiden wondered if the coaches really believed in him. Had they forgotten what he had done in high school? Was he going to spend his freshman year waiting? Still, he never complained. He stayed after practice. He studied extra film. He learned every call, every adjustment, and every responsibility in the defense. His teammates began to notice. The coaches noticed too. Quietly, Kaiden was becoming one of the hardest working players on the roster. He knew opportunities in football don't always come when you're ready. Sometimes they come when someone else isn't. And when that moment finally arrived, Kaiden Cross vowed he wouldn't just take the field, he would take the job. Every player remembers the day they get their first game day, the opportunity. Every player remembers the day they get their first real chance. For Kaiden Cross, that day had finally arrived. The depth chart had changed. Kaiden Cross was no longer buried at third string. He was now the second string free safety. After weeks of relentless work, earning the trust of his coaches and proving himself in practice, Kaiden had climbed one step closer to where he believed he belonged. But this promotion meant something even bigger. Against Kentucky, Kaiden would finally take the field on defense. This wasn't just another game on the schedule. This was his opportunity. As he walked through the tunnel and looked around a packed Williams-Brice Stadium, he could feel the energy. The crowd roared as the Gamecocks ran onto the field, and for the first time, Kaiden knew he wouldn't just be watching from the sideline. He would be in the game. Every snap mattered, every tackle, every pass defended, every opportunity to make a play. Kaiden knew the coaches weren't just evaluating his talent, they were evaluating whether they could trust him to lead the defense when the moment mattered most. He wanted to show everyone exactly who he was, not just a backup, not just a promising freshman, but the future of South Carolina's defense. The player who could command the secondary, make the defensive calls, keep everyone in position, and erase mistakes before they became touchdowns. He wanted to become the face of the defense, the voice of the secondary, the last line of defense every teammate could rely on. He was thinking about making every snap count, because he knew one great performance could turn an opportunity into a starting job. The interception that changed everything. Every player has one moment that changes the way coaches see them. For Kaiden Cross, that moment came against Arkansas. Kaiden's performance against Kentucky had earned him respect. The coaches saw his effort, his teammates saw his confidence. The fans began to notice the freshman's safety wearing number 7. But Kaiden understood something. Respect wasn't enough. If he wanted to become South Carolina's starting free safety, he needed a moment that nobody could ignore. That opportunity came the following week against the Arkansas Razorbacks. All week, Kaiden prepared as if he were already the starter. He studied Arkansas's offense late into the night, learning the quarterback's tendencies, recognizing route concepts, and memorizing formations. By kickoff, he felt like he had already played the game in his mind 100 times. When his name was called, Kaiden stepped onto the field with one goal: make a play. Not for the crowd, not for the cameras, for the coaches. He wanted them to see that he wasn't just capable of filling in, he was capable of leading the defense. As the game unfolded, Kaiden played with patience and discipline, refusing to chase plays that weren't his responsibility. He trusted his eyes, communicated with the secondary, and waited for the offense to make a mistake. Then it happened. Arkansas dropped back to pass. The quarterback looked toward the middle of the field, believing he had an open receiver. But Kaiden had already seen it. He broke on the throw before the football ever left the quarterback's hand. In one explosive burst, he jumped the route. The ball hit his hands. Interception. Williams-Brice Stadium erupted. The Gamecock sideline exploded with excitement as Kaiden sprinted down the field, surrounded by teammates celebrating one of the biggest defensive plays of the game. But for Kaiden, it was more than just an interception. It was validation. It proved that the instincts coaches had seen in practice translated to Saturdays. It proved he could make game-changing plays against SEC competition. Most importantly, it changed the conversation. No longer was Kaiden Cross viewed as a talented backup waiting for his chance. Now coaches began asking a different question. How soon could they make him the starter? One interception didn't just change the game, it changed Kaiden Cross's career. The starter. Sometimes the greatest performances don't end in victory. Sometimes they end in respect. Kaiden Cross had finally done it. After beginning the season buried on the third string, grinding his way to second string, making the most of every opportunity against Kentucky, and recording his first career interception against Arkansas, the freshman from Chesapeake, Virginia, had climbed to the top of the depth chart. For the first time in his college career, Kaiden Cross was South Carolina's starting free safety. There was no celebration, no shouting, no victory lap, just quiet confidence. Because Kaiden knew earning the job wasn't the hard part. Keeping it was. Then came the news. His first career start would come against one of the best teams in the country. The number 14 Auburn Tigers, an explosive offense, future NFL talent, one of the toughest opponents on South Carolina's schedule. The coaches didn't care that Kaiden was a freshman. If anything, they expected even more. This wasn't just another football game. It was his audition as the leader of the defense. Throughout the week, Kaiden prepared differently. He wasn't studying film as a backup anymore. He was studying it as the quarterback of the defense. Every formation, every motion, every route combination, every protection, every tendency. He wanted to know Auburn's offense so well that he could recognize a play before it even happened. His position coach watched him during film study and finally smiled. "You're not preparing like a freshman anymore. You're preparing like a starter." Those words meant everything. Saturday finally arrived. More than 80,000 fans packed Williams-Brice Stadium. The lights were brighter, the noise was louder, the pressure was unlike anything Kaiden had experienced. Standing in the tunnel, he closed his eyes. He thought about Chesapeake, about being overlooked, about Virginia Tech never offering him when he needed it most, about arriving at South Carolina as a third-string freshman, about every practice, every sprint, every late-night film session, every sacrifice. Every moment had led to this one. Then the tunnel opened. The Gamecocks charged onto the field. For the first time, Kaiden wasn't running out hoping for an opportunity. He was running out as South Carolina's starting free safety. From the opening kickoff, Auburn tested the Gamecocks. Every drive was physical. Every snap mattered, but South Carolina's defense answered. The defensive line lived in Auburn's backfield, collapsing the pocket and forcing hurried decisions. The linebackers attacked downhill, filling running lanes and delivering punishing hits. And behind them stood Kaiden, calm, confident, in control. He made the calls before the snap. He aligned the secondary. He kept everyone on the same page. The freshman who had started the season buried on the depth chart now looked like the veteran leader of the defense. The Gamecocks forced multiple sacks. They created turnovers. They forced 3-and-outs. Every defensive series ended with energy. Every stop gave the offense another opportunity to swing the momentum. But every time the defense celebrated on the sideline, their celebration was short-lived. The offense struggled to move the football. Drives ended almost as quickly as they began. Turnover after turnover, missed opportunities, 3-and-outs. Instead of building momentum, the offense kept handing it right back to Auburn. The defense barely had time to catch its breath before the helmets went back on, again and again and again. Each time they ran back onto the field, the challenge grew even harder. Short fields, little rest, more pressure. Kaiden looked around at his teammates. The defensive linemen had been fighting in the trenches all night. The linebackers had taken hit after hit. The secondary had covered receivers for what felt like an entire game. Fatigue was setting in, not because they lacked conditioning, because they were carrying the weight of the game. Still, nobody complained. Nobody pointed fingers. Kaiden gathered the defense before another drive. He looked each teammate in the eyes. "One more stop," he said. "We've got one more stop in us." The defense responded. Another sack. Another pass breakup. Another forced punt. Every time Auburn thought they had found momentum, South Carolina's defense answered. Kaiden flew across the field making tackles. He broke up passes over the middle. He directed traffic before every snap. He played with the poise of someone far beyond his years. By the fourth quarter, his jersey was covered in grass stains. His legs were heavy. His body was exhausted, but his effort never changed. He continued flying to the football, continued encouraging his teammates, continued leading. The final whistle blew. Auburn had won the game. South Carolina walked off the field with a loss. The scoreboard said one thing, but everyone inside Williams-Brice Stadium had seen something different. The Gamecocks had found the future leader of their defense. The coaches didn't see a freshman anymore. They saw a starter. His teammates didn't see the kid who once sat at third string. They saw the voice of the secondary. The fans didn't just learn his name. They believed in it. Losses hurt. But sometimes a loss reveals more about a player than a victory ever could. Against number 14 Auburn, Kaiden Cross didn't just prove he belonged. He proved he could become the face of South Carolina's defense. The climb was over. The journey had truly begun. Cracks in the armor, winning hides problems, losing exposes everything. For Kaiden Cross, the loss to number 14 Auburn hurt more than any game he'd ever played. Not because South Carolina lost, because he felt like the defense had done everything possible to win. From the opening kickoff, the Gamecock defense flew around the field. Quarterbacks were pressured, running lanes disappeared, receivers were hit the moment they caught the football. 3 and out, sack, turnover, another stop. Time after time, Kaiden and the defense jogged off the field believing they'd finally given the offense the momentum it needed. Instead, a turnover, another stalled drive, a missed opportunity. Then the defense was right back on the field. Sometimes it felt like they had barely caught their breath before hearing their helmets called again. Kaiden looked around at his teammates on defense. They were exhausted, hands on hips, heavy breathing, sweat pouring down their faces, but nobody complained. They lined back up. Again, another stop. Again, another sack. Again, another forced punt. The defense refused to quit. Yet every time they looked toward the scoreboard, Auburn still controlled the game. The offense couldn't find rhythm. Drives ended before they started. Mistakes piled on top of mistakes. Every turnover gave Auburn another short field. Every failed possession meant the defense had to answer one more time. They did, until they couldn't anymore. When the final whistle blew, Auburn 33, South Carolina 27. Kaiden stood near midfield with his helmet in his hands. He wasn't thinking about his stat line. 21 assisted tackles, 7 solo tackles, 4 pass breakups. One of the best games he'd ever played. None of it mattered because they lost. Inside the locker room, nobody spoke. Pads hit the floor, tape was ripped off wrists. Players stared into empty lockers. Coach Shane Beamer reminded everyone that the season wasn't over. There are still goals in front of us. Most players nodded. Kaiden listened, but his mind was already somewhere else. The next week brought another challenge. Georgia, another ranked opponent, another opportunity to prove South Carolina belonged among the SEC's best. Breaking point. Sometimes the hardest part of football isn't making the tackle. It's wondering if it'll matter. The sting of the Auburn loss leave for only a day. There wasn't time to feel sorry for themselves. Another challenge was waiting. Another top opponent. Another hostile SEC atmosphere. The Georgia Bulldogs. As South Carolina's buses rolled into Athens, Georgia, Kaiden Cross stared out the window at Sanford Stadium. Thousands of Georgia fans were already filling the parking lots hours before kickoff. The red and black sea surrounding the stadium reminded everyone just how difficult this road trip would be. For Kaiden, though, this wasn't about the crowd. It wasn't about the rankings. It was about proving South Carolina could respond. The Auburn game was over. The next test had arrived. Inside the locker room, Coach Shane Beamer kept his message simple. Forget last week. Play your brand of football. Trust each other. As the Gamecocks stormed through the tunnel, more than 90,000 Georgia fans erupted. The noise shook the stadium. Every snap had to be communicated with hand signals. Every mistake would be magnified. From the opening kickoff, Georgia's offense came exactly as advertised. Physical, patient, methodical. But South Carolina's defense answered every challenge. The defensive line collapsed the pocket. The linebackers filled every running lane. The secondary stayed disciplined. And once again, Kaiden Cross was everywhere, flying downhill against the run, covering tight ends, helping corners over the top, making open field tackles before they became explosive plays. Drive after drive, Georgia was forced into third and long situations. The defense kept getting off the field. Every stop felt like momentum was finally beginning to swing towards South Carolina. Then, the offense gave the ball away, a fumble. The defense jogged right back onto the field. No complaints, no frustration, just another job to do. Georgia started deep in South Carolina territory with a chance to score. The Bulldogs drove inside the red zone. The crowd sensed another touchdown. On 2nd and goal, Georgia dialed up a play-action pass. The quarterback looked toward the back of the end zone. The receiver broke free. For a split second, it looked like 6 points. But Kaiden had already recognized the route. He planted his foot, exploded across the field, leaped in front of the receiver. Interception. Sanford Stadium fell almost silent. Kaiden came down with the football, ripping away what looked like a guaranteed touchdown. His teammates sprinted toward him. The South Carolina sideline exploded. The defense had delivered another game-changing play. Another opportunity, another chance for the offense. As Kaiden handed the ball to the official, he believed the momentum had finally shifted. This was the turning point. This was the spark. But only a few plays later, the offense turned the football over. Again, almost in the exact same area of the field. The defense turned around and started jogging back onto the field before they had even caught their breath. Helmets nodded, hands rested on hips. Nobody pointed fingers. Nobody argued. They simply lined up again. Because for the second straight week, it felt like they had no other choice. Series after series, the defense continued fighting. They forced 3 and outs, created pressure, made tackles behind the line of scrimmage, delivered hit after hit. Yet every time they looked toward the scoreboard, Georgia found another way to capitalize on another short field. Kaiden could feel something changing inside him. Not a lack of effort, not a lack of belief in his teammates. Frustration. He wasn't frustrated because football was hard. He expected that. He was frustrated because the defense kept answering every challenge, only to be put back into impossible situations. One turnover, then another, then another. The defense barely had time to sit down before hearing their names called again. Late in the fourth quarter, exhausted players continued battling through cramps, bruises, and fatigue. Nobody quit. Nobody gave less than everything. When the final whistle echoed through Sanford Stadium, Georgia walked away with the win. Kaiden stood near midfield, hands on his hips. He had poured everything he had into another SEC battle. An interception, countless tackles, leadership, effort, heart, and once again, it wasn't enough. Walking back toward the locker room, one question kept replaying in his mind. How much more can this defense give? With only a handful of games remaining in his freshman season, another thought began creeping into his head. One he never imagined he'd have when he committed to South Carolina. If things didn't change, was this really where he belonged? For the first time since arriving in Columbia, the transfer portal crossed his mind, not because he wanted an easier path, but because he wanted a chance to win. And that question would follow him long after the lights inside Sanford Stadium went dark. Texas. Sometimes a season changes with one game. After 2 heartbreaking losses, the Gamecocks climbed back onto the plane, knowing the schedule wasn't getting any easier. Waiting for them was the number 4 Texas Longhorns in one of the toughest environments in college football. The defense had carried South Carolina for 2 straight weeks. Now they needed help. Lights inside Texas Stadium were brighter than ever as over 100,000 fans filled the stands in burnt orange. Everyone expected South Carolina to fold. Everyone expected another close loss. But inside the Gamecock locker room, the message was simple. Play for each other. Kaiden Cross tightened his gloves and looked around at his teammates. For the first time in weeks, he saw confidence. Not frustration, not doubt. Confidence. From the opening kickoff, everything felt different. The offense wasn't going 3 and out. The offensive line controlled the line of scrimmage. The running game found rhythm. The quarterback finally trusted his receivers. Every first down gave the defense another chance to breathe. And when Texas answered, South Carolina answered right back. And the defense were flying around the field. Every tackle echoed through the stadium. Every third down became a battle. Texas had one of the nation's most explosive offenses, but South Carolina refused to back down. Kaiden flew downhill to stop the run. He broke up passes across the middle. He lined up teammates before every snap. The defense looked connected, fast, relentless. Late in the third quarter, Texas drove deep into Gamecock territory. The crowd stood. Momentum was shifting. On third down, Kaiden diagnosed the route immediately. He broke underneath the receiver and delivered a crushing hit that forced an incompletion. The stadium fell silent for just a moment. Texas settled for 3 instead of 7. Then something happened that hadn't happened in weeks. The offense responded. A long touchdown drive. Methodical, physical, confident, no turnover, no missed opportunity, just execution. For the first time in what felt like forever, all 3 phases were finally playing together. Special teams won the field position battle. The offense sustained drives, the defense forced stops. This was the football team Kaiden had been waiting to see. Standing on the sideline late in the 4th quarter, Kaiden smiled. Not because the game was easy, because every player was fighting. Nobody was asking the defense to save them anymore. The offense was carrying its share. The special teams were making winning plays. Football finally looked like the ultimate team game again. The doubts that had started growing after Auburn, the thoughts about entering the transfer portal, for one night, they disappeared. Because this was all Kaiden ever wanted. A team that fought together, a team that believed together, a team that won together. As the final seconds ticked away in Austin, Kaiden looked across the field. Maybe, just maybe, the season wasn't over after all. Maybe those 2 painful losses had built something stronger. The Gamecocks had found their identity, and with 3 games still remaining, everyone in college football suddenly realized something. South Carolina wasn't backing down anymore. The fight had finally become a complete team effort. The breaking point. Every season has a moment where everything you've worked for is either strengthened or tested. For South Carolina, that moment arrived under the bright lights against the number 2 team in the country, the Tennessee Volunteers, a college football playoff hopeful, a Heisman Trophy contender at quarterback, and one final opportunity to prove the Gamecocks belonged. After fighting through heartbreaking losses to Auburn and Georgia, South Carolina's playoff hopes were hanging by a thread. There was no room for another defeat. Win, and the dream stayed alive. Lose, and the season would all but slip away. For Kaiden Cross, this wasn't just another game. It was another chance to silence every doubt that had been building inside him. The opening kickoff flew into the Tennessee night. Everyone expected the Volunteers to overwhelm South Carolina. Instead, the Gamecocks punched first. The defense flew around the field. Kaiden Cross was everywhere, flying downhill to stop the run, breaking up passes, lining teammates up before every snap, making sure everyone knew their assignment. And somehow, the nation's most explosive offense looked uncomfortable. The Heisman favorite couldn't find the explosive plays everyone expected. Every completion was contested. Every drive felt difficult. By halftime, the scoreboard shocked the entire country. Tennessee, 16, South Carolina, 14. Only 2 points separated the Gamecocks from the number 2 team in America. The television cameras kept showing stunned Tennessee fans. The commentators couldn't believe it. South Carolina wasn't surviving. They were competing. Inside the visiting locker room, there was belief. For the first time in weeks, everyone believed. Players were yelling. Coaches reminded them that 30 more minutes could change the season. Kaiden sat quietly, helmet beside him, breathing heavily. He looked around the room. This is what we've been waiting for. 1 half, 1 opportunity, 30 minutes from changing everything. Then, the second half began, and Tennessee reminded everyone why they were ranked number 2 in the nation. The Volunteers adjusted. The Heisman quarterback started seeing the field differently. The throws became quicker. The receivers found space. The running game opened. Every mistake South Carolina made, Tennessee punished. The offense couldn't answer. Drives stalled. Third downs disappeared. Turnovers killed momentum. The defense stayed on the field longer and longer and longer. Special teams couldn't flip field position. Suddenly, all 3 phases that had finally looked connected against Texas fell apart. The energy that carried South Carolina through the first half vanished. Kaiden continued fighting, running sideline to sideline, making tackles, trying to rally teammates, trying to keep everyone focused. But every time the defense came off the field, they walked right back onto it. The scoreboard kept moving. The crowd became louder. The game slipped farther away. Late in the 4th quarter, Kaiden glanced toward the scoreboard. The outcome was no longer in doubt. He looked toward the sideline, then back at the field. One thought entered his mind. Why are the starters still out here? The game was decided. Bodies were tired. The season already felt like it was slipping away. Yet everyone was still fighting through meaningless snaps. He kept playing, because that's what leaders do, but mentally, he wasn't there anymore. For the third straight week, the questions returned. Questions he thought had disappeared after the Texas win. Did I make the right decision? Was South Carolina really the place for me? What if I entered the transfer portal? Who would even want me? Would another program believe in me? Could I compete for a national championship somewhere else? Every missed opportunity replayed in his mind. Virginia Tech passing on him, the losses, the frustration, the feeling of giving everything, and still walking off the field defeated. He had come to South Carolina to build something, to win, to become part of changing the program. But standing there in Tennessee, he couldn't ignore the doubts anymore. Maybe he had chosen the wrong path. As the final seconds ticked away, Kaiden slowly removed his helmet. He stared into the crowd. Orange fireworks filled the sky. Tennessee celebrated another step toward the college football playoff. South Carolina quietly walked toward the tunnel. No words, no excuses, just silence. For everyone else, it was another loss. For Kaiden Cross, it felt like a crossroads. Not because of what happened on the field, but because of what was happening inside his own mind. The freshman who had fought through every obstacle was beginning to wonder whether his future still belonged in Columbia. And with the transfer portal looming after the season, those questions would only get louder. Because sometimes, the toughest battle isn't against the team lined up across from you. Sometimes it's against the voice in your own head. Kaiden's next move. Every football season changes you. Some players finish stronger, others simply try to survive. For Kaiden Cross, the last month had become more than just football. It had become a test of his body, his confidence, and his future. 4 straight games against some of the best teams in college football had left their mark. Auburn, Georgia, Texas, Tennessee. Every Saturday was another war. Every Sunday was another trip to the training room. Bruises covered his body, his shoulder ached every time he tackled. His legs felt heavier than they had all season. He wasn't healthy anymore, but he never told anyone. He wrapped the injuries, took the treatment, put the pads back on, and kept playing. Because that's what leaders were supposed to do. The playoff dream was gone. South Carolina had fallen out of the national conversation. Now only 2 regular season games remained. Mississippi State, and Clemson. Most of the locker room still talked about finishing strong, but Kaiden's mindset had quietly changed. He was exhausted, not just physically, mentally. For weeks, he had emptied the tank for a team that couldn't seem to put everything together. One week, the defense carried the offense. Another week, the offense disappeared. Special teams made mistakes. Turnovers ruined momentum. Every Saturday felt like the same story. Eventually, something inside him changed. For the first time all season, Kaiden stopped worrying about saving everyone else. He started thinking about himself. Not because he didn't care about football, but because he had begun thinking about life after the season. NFL scouts watched production. Transfer portal coaches watched production. Awards were built on production. If he couldn't save the season, he could at least make sure nobody overlooked his talent. Against Mississippi State, he played with a different mentality. Every tackle mattered. Every pass breakup mattered. Every interception opportunity mattered. He attacked every snap like it was an audition, not for South Carolina. For whoever might be watching, coaches noticed, teammates noticed, even opponents noticed. It was as if Kaiden had found another gear. He looked faster, more aggressive, more instinctive. The frustration he'd carried for weeks had turned into fuel. He wasn't playing scared anymore. He was simply playing free. Yet underneath the highlight plays, the questions still lingered. Every night he lay awake thinking about what came next. Should he stay? Should he leave? The transfer portal wasn't just an idea anymore, it was becoming a real possibility. He imagined starting over somewhere else, a program competing for championships, a defense with more depth, an offense capable of matching the defense's effort. Somewhere he could chase the national title he had dreamed about since he first put on football pads. Then another thought hit him. South Carolina was about to lose one of its biggest offensive weapons to the NFL draft. The player every defense had to account for. The player who could change a game with one touch. Without him, what would this offense look like? Would the Gamecocks take another step backward? Would competing in the SEC become even harder? Could this team realistically challenge Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, or the rest of the conference? The future suddenly looked uncertain. Still, there was one game left after Mississippi State, Clemson, then a bowl game. One final opportunity to finish his freshman season the right way. One last chance to remind everyone exactly who Kaiden Cross was, but every big hit, every interception, every tackle brought him closer to a decision that would define the next chapter of his career. Stay loyal to the program that believed in him, or enter the transfer portal and search for a new beginning. The season wasn't over, but the countdown had already begun, and Kaiden Cross knew the biggest decision of his football life was waiting just beyond the final whistle. The breakout. Sometimes a career isn't defined by an entire season. Sometimes it's defined by one unforgettable night. For months, Kaiden Cross carried more than just the responsibility of being South Carolina's free safety. He carried doubt. Every Saturday became another test of his toughness. The heartbreaking loss at Auburn, the collapse against Georgia after another heroic defensive effort, a season-saving upset over North for Texas that briefly reignited playoff dreams. Then came Tennessee. For one half, the Gamecocks looked like they belonged with the nation's elite. Then everything unraveled. The second half exposed every weakness South Carolina had. The offense stalled, the defense finally broke, special teams couldn't provide a spark. As the scoreboard grew more lopsided, Kaiden stood on the sideline asking himself questions no athlete ever wants to answer. Did I make the right decision? Can I really win here? If I entered the transfer portal, who would want me? Those questions followed him through the rest of the season. His body wasn't healthy anymore. Every tackle hurt. Every practice became another reminder that he wasn't anywhere close to 100%. Yet every Saturday, he suited up. By the time South Carolina became bowl eligible, something inside him had changed. He stopped worrying about expectations. He stopped trying to convince everyone he belonged. He simply went back to playing football, one play at a time, one possession at a time, one opportunity at a time. Then came Las Vegas, the Las Vegas Bowl. South Carolina versus North Dakota State. For most people, it was just another bowl game. For Kaiden Cross, it was an audition for his future. NFL scouts filled the stadium. Transfer portal rumors followed him everywhere he walked. Every defensive snap felt like an interview. There would be no second chances, only 4 quarters. From the opening drive, something felt different. Kaiden wasn't thinking, he was reacting, reading the quarterback before the snap, breaking on throws before receivers even turned around, playing faster than he had all season. Then, the first interception, a perfectly timed break on an underneath route. The crowd erupted. The Gamecocks had momentum, but Kaiden wasn't finished. Later in the second quarter, the quarterback challenged him again, another mistake, another interception. Suddenly, the television broadcast wasn't talking about the game anymore. They were talking about number 7. Halftime arrived. Analysts couldn't believe what they were watching. He's everywhere. This is the best game of his college career. He's playing himself onto NFL draft boards tonight. The second half only added to the legend. Early in the third quarter, the quarterback tried to attack the deep middle. Kaiden closed the distance in an instant. His third interception. The stadium exploded. His teammates surrounded him. The South Carolina sideline knew they were witnessing something special. Then came the moment nobody would ever forget. Late in the fourth quarter, North Dakota State had one final chance. The quarterback forced another pass. Kaiden read it the entire way. He stepped in front. Interception number 4. History. 4 interceptions. 1 game, a Las Vegas Bowl record. A performance that instantly became one of the greatest defensive bowl games in college football. When the final whistle sounded, South Carolina had won. But the biggest story wasn't the score. It was Kaiden Cross. The same player who had questioned himself only weeks earlier had just become the hottest name in college football. By sunrise, phones across the country were buzzing. Reporters began confirming what many suspected. Kaiden Cross had officially entered the NCAA transfer portal. Within hours, speculation spread everywhere. SEC contenders, Big Ten powerhouses, national championship programs. Every school looking for an elite safety suddenly had the same name circled. Television analysts debated where he fit best. Fans flooded social media with predictions. Recruiting insiders tracked every visit and every phone call. The conversation had completely changed. Just weeks earlier, people wondered whether Kaiden had made the wrong choice. Now, everyone wanted him to make their choice. One unforgettable night in Las Vegas had rewritten his story. The overlooked safety had become one of the most coveted players in the transfer portal. His journey at South Carolina had reached its turning point, but his football story was only just beginning. Open quote, 4 interceptions changed a game, 1 decision would change his future, close quote.